Good afternoon, everyone. I feel like it should be about 5 o'clock already, and it's here we are, 1 o'clock. We're going to do first today the Maryland African American Museum Corporation, and then we'll do the Maryland State Department of Education headquarters, and then we'll do the Department of General Services. So we'll start first with Connor. You want to go ahead and get started?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. My name is Connor Brown, Policy Analyst with the Department of Legislative Services, here to present the fiscal 2027 budget analysis for the Maryland African American Museum Corporation, or MAAMC. MAAMC manages the Reginald F. Lewis Museum of Maryland African American History and Culture in Baltimore City. To begin, on page 1 of the analysis, the fiscal 2027 budget for MAAMC increases by $284,955, or 4.9%, bringing the total allowance to $6.2 million. However, this increase comes from privately raised revenue. State funds are issued to MAAMC as a grant, which is level funded at $2.7 million in fiscal 2027. On page 2, Exhibit 1 shows an overview of agency spending by category. Approximately 57% of expenses in fiscal 2025 supported personnel, while the remaining supported museum operations, contracts, events, and community collaboration. Moving on to page 3, Exhibit 2 outlines expenditures and revenues for MAAMC for fiscal 2023 through estimates for fiscal 2027. In fiscal 2025, expenditures exceeded revenues, and while MAAMC projects relatively even expenditures and revenues in fiscal 2026, they project another deficit in fiscal 2027. The primary driver of this is contractual services, which decreased by an estimated 13% in fiscal 2026 before increasing again in fiscal 2027. MAAMC attributes this to fewer temporary exhibit openings in fiscal 2026, as well as permanent exhibit openings where expenses have been capitalized. MAAMC should discuss reasons for the fiscal 2025 deficit and any plans to reduce the projected deficit in fiscal 2027. On page 4, Exhibit 3 shows the number of donors and dollar value of charitable contributions from fiscal 2019 to 2025. MAAMC saw a large increase in both donors and contributions in fiscal 25 that they attribute primarily to the Lewis Museum's 20th anniversary, which included various celebrations and events throughout the year. The key observation section begins on page 5 with attendance figures for the Lewis Museum. In fiscal 2025, total in-person and virtual attendance increased by almost 30% from fiscal 2024, continuing a trend upward since attendance plummeted during the COVID-19 pandemic. The museum had just over 20,000 general admissions in fiscal 2025, while the other 9,000 were through in-person programming. On page 6, Exhibit 5 shows volunteer and regular volunteer docent numbers for fiscal 2018 through 2025. In fiscal 2025, MAAMC saw a decrease in volunteers from 100 in fiscal 24 to 71 in fiscal 25. MAAMC attributes this decline to a decrease in the number of corporate volunteer groups. Pages 7 through 9 provide an audit overview of MAAMC, primarily focusing on an August 2025 fiscal compliance audit conducted by the Office of Legislative Audits, or OLA. In this audit, OLA identified 8 total findings, including 1 repeat finding that MAAMC had not established adequate accountability and controls over its art and historical artifacts. In addition to the fiscal compliance audit, OLA conducted a special review of state units exempt from state procurement laws and regulations that was published in November 2025 and is discussed on page 9. In that review, there was one finding that pertained to MAAMC regarding gaps in their procurement policy in instances where the policy was not always complied with. MAAMC has noted that they have made policy updates in response to this audit, which are set to be voted on by MAAMC's board next month. Finally, on page 10, DLS concurs with the governor's fiscal 2027 allowance. And with that, I conclude my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Nice job.
Thank you.
Okay, can we have Terry Lee Freeman, Executive Director, come forward? Anyone else you want to bring along with you?
Nobody will come with.
We'll go easy on you then.
Good afternoon. Thank you. And thank you, Connor, for being such an incredible analyst for us. Connor came and visited us, learned what the museum did, and toured with me, even though I'm not the best tour guide, but thank you for coming anyway. And thank you for your continued support of the Lewis Museum. We agree with the fiscal year 2027 legislative analyst report and appreciate the time spent understanding our work firsthand. The Lewis remains committed to its mission to document, interpret, and preserve the experiences, contributions, and culture of Black Marylanders while serving as a catalyst for education and dialogue. Fiscal year 25 was a strong year. It was driven by our 20th anniversary programming and 3 major exhibitions that we opened. Eyewitness Media and the Movement highlighted the role of Black Marylanders in securing the 1964 Civil Rights Act. Titan, the legacy of Reginald F. Lewis, tells the story of our namesake from East Baltimore to a landmark $1 billion Wall Street deal, and Lynching in Maryland, which was developed with the Maryland Lynching Memorial Project and was supported through a federal appropriation. Attendance increased significantly, including more than 3,000 visitors during our Juneteenth celebration. School field trips more than double, with 167 schools visiting from jurisdictions across Maryland and included Washington, D.C. Membership increased and community engagement reached new heights. Like museums nationwide, however, we are operating in a challenging fiscal environment. Earned and contributed income declined in the first half of fiscal 26 due to reduced admissions, softer corporate giving, and limited federal funding. The projected deficit cited in the analyst report is driven by 3 things: rising staff benefit costs, particularly because of our participation in the state pension system, increased fuel and utility costs, and contractual service expenses. Staff costs remain our largest expense, and we have already reduced staffing through attrition. We are actively addressing the budget pressures through organizational restructuring and attrition to control costs. We are committed to mitigating the deficit without reducing community programming. Energy-efficient upgrades are underway, supported by a capital grant to reduce long-term utility costs. We continue to manage public funds responsibly and transparently. The museum was audited by the Office of Legislative Audits, which identified 8 findings as stated. We have made progress on or completed 6 of the 8 recommendations. Work is underway to complete collections inventory and valuation, which is supported now by our collections manager, who is full-time, and interns. We have strengthened internal controls, including separating duties related to special events and financial processes. To stabilize revenue and expand impact, we are focusing on 3 priority audiences: Gen Z and millennials through programs like Culturally Curated, children through our new Kid Zone, which welcomed nearly 600 children during its soft opening on King Day, and seniors through our partnership upcoming called Golden Hours, which will be specifically for our seniors in the community. We're also expanding partnerships, including our satellite gallery with Whiting Turner in West Baltimore at the Touchpoint facility. The Reginald F. Lewis Museum is a vital cultural and educational asset for Maryland. State support allows us to continue serving diverse audiences, preserving history, and providing access to meaningful learning experiences. We appreciate your continued partnership and look forward to working together to ensure the museum's long-term sustainability and public impact. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. I have a list of the findings here.
Yes.
I just was curious, have you addressed each one of those, or?
We have addressed the majority of them. We still have some work to do in the special events area. We're hiring a new person to come in, and until we have another person, we can't divide the responsibility.
Okay.
So that is being worked on. And the collections area is the biggest piece. And that is going to take us a little while. We had hoped that we would be able to have it finished by this June. The collections manager says 14,000 items, probably not going to happen. But we've utilized interns already. We're looking for some more interns, talking to UMBC about getting your interns in to help with the process of both valuation and inventory. We do anticipate having everything completed by the next audit cycle, but the majority of them have been completed.
Okay, great. All right, well, so next time you come, you shouldn't have any of these.
That's right. That's
All right. Thank you very much. Any
Thank you.
comments? Senator Bailey?
That was, I just wanted to follow up just on the accountability. I think what you're doing is great, but when I read the audit findings, there are some things, the blank open checks,
Yep,
right, and no cash receipts.
done.
Right.
Yeah,
When you say done,
When I say
if you wouldn't mind just explaining what we've done to make sure to correct
Well,
that.
we've destroyed the checks, first off, and all are kept in a locked safe that is in a separate room from anybody's office. So we, at one time, had the safe was in the accountant's office, and those blank checks actually were found there, too. So now they're in a locked safe that's in a different room.
And the other thing was, it did say that there was questionable activity
Yes.
by one employee that obviously, had the best intentions, but then when you have an employee that takes advantage of it,
Yes.
have we dealt with that employee?
Yes, we have. That person no longer is employed by the museum and is currently investigation is underway.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's it. Okay.
That's it.
Thank you.
Who do I have on the list here? Taryn Atkinson?
Oh, that was my assistant.
That was your, okay. She signed up to testify today. Okay, all good. Thank you. Okay, then we'll move on to Maryland State Department of Education headquarters. Catherine Barber is our analyst, and Dr. Carrie Wright, and two public witnesses will be coming to talk to us.
Hello, thank you, Chair King. For the record, my name is Catherine Barber, and I'll be presenting the DLS budget analysis for MSDE headquarters today. Starting on page 1 with the operating budget summary, the fiscal 27 budget for MSDE headquarters increases by $14.7 million, or 3.7% to $409.7 million. Turning to the performance analysis section on page 6, Exhibit 1 shows MSDE's Managing for Results measure for retention of teachers of color. 3-year retention stayed relatively flat across demographics from fiscal 24 to 25 at 73.8% and remains below the goal of 75% by the 26-27 school year. Turning to page 8, Exhibit 2 shows outcomes for the Division of Rehabilitative Services, or DOORS. In fiscal 25, 1,044 disabled individuals achieved an employment outcome, which is an increase of 3.5% from fiscal 24, but remains below the agency's target by a few hundred individuals. Additionally, 8,290 disabled individuals received pre-employment transition services, which is a 23.5% increase from fiscal 24 and exceeded the service target. On page 9, there's a discussion of MSDE's fiscal 25 closeout. The 2025 Joint Chairman's Report requested MSDE and the Maryland Center for School Safety submit a report on fiscal 25 closeout data. MSDE reported large amounts of unspent and encumbered federal and special funds. The largest unspent balance was $97 million in federal funds for food services. MSDE also encumbered $104 million in federal funds for Title I programs and $88 million for special education grants. MSDE should comment on the reasons for continuously encumbering large amounts of funds, particularly in regard to DOOR's federal funds. Additionally, while MSDE provided its own closeout information, the agency did not include the required MCSS data in the submission, so MSDE should explain why its JCR response did not include the required information. MCSS should discuss fiscal 25 encumbered and unspent funds excluded from the report and explain any reverted or canceled school safety grants. Like last year, DLS recommends adopting committee narrative requesting a report on accounting practices and closeout data. In regard to fiscal 26 legislative additions, Section 21 of the fiscal 26 budget bill added $250,000 in general funds to support the establishment of a pilot program for commercial driver's license education and licensing as part of the state's technical education curriculum. MSDE conducted a study into program feasibility and concluded that CDL programs are not feasible in high schools due to the age requirements for Class C licenses and interstate licensing, high program costs, and low student interest. MSDE should discuss how much of the legislative
Can I stop
addition.
for 1 second there? If MSDE isn't the appropriate place for that, for the CDL study, what would be?
Maybe the Motor Vehicle Administration. I know that they contributed to
Possibility.
this study, but
Okay.
that might be better for the agency to comment on. MSDE should discuss how much of the legislative addition has been spent on the feasibility study and how much of the remaining funding will be reverted. Turning to page 11, Exhibit 3 provides an overview of agency spending. The division with the largest allowance is DOORS, which receives $171 million, or 42% of the budget. On page 12, Exhibit 4 breaks out the changes from fiscal 26 to 27. The allowance increases by $14.7 million after accounting for deficiency appropriations, and most of this growth is due to personnel costs, which increased by $13.3 million. Additionally, the allowance includes a nearly $6 million increase in the Division of Finance due to the realignment of federal funds from the Division of Early Childhood. MSDE plans to redistribute these funds as needed to its grant programs. Other large increases include $4.4 million for assessment contracts, $3.3 million in the Division of Instructional Programs for expert review teams, and $2.7 million in the Division of Student Support and Federal Programs for behavioral mental health training and grants. MSDE should explain the reasons for large increases in special fund grants within these divisions. The discussion of personnel begins on page 14. Both fiscal 26 and 27 had 1,180 authorized regular positions, and as of December 31st, 2025, MSDE headquarters and its independent agencies reported 99.5 vacancies. The issue section of this analysis begins on page 15. Issue 1 discusses a fiscal compliance audit published a few weeks ago that flagged issues with oversight of hiring, licensing, and financial management. Regarding hiring and licensing oversight, the Office of Legislative Audits determined that MSDE did not establish procedures to ensure that LEAs properly screened employees for past disciplinary action or criminal activity that disqualified them from working with children. In addition, many LEAs were not enrolled in the required public safety monitoring systems for alerts about employee criminal activity. MSDE also approved educator licenses without adequate independent review and did not monitor whether educators were teaching the specific subjects for which they were licensed. As for financial management oversight, OLA identified lost revenue and unverified spending across several programs. For one, MSDE did not pursue federal reimbursement in a timely manner, resulting in approximately $3.6 million in lost investment interest for the state. MSDE had also not claimed $20.7 million in federal COVID-19 relief funds after clerical error led the agency to return a larger federal payment without refiling for the correct amount. As of December 2025, MSDE had recovered $4 million of these funds, and the agency should provide an update on the status of the remaining $16.7 million awaiting reimbursement. Additionally, MSDE did not properly document the amount of federal funds that it was owed or how much it had collected in fiscal 24 and 25. For fiscal 25, MSDE could not provide documentation that 6 of its 10 accrued revenue entries, totaling $176 million, accurately reflected total amounts collectible from the federal government. In some cases, MSDE appears to have overreported fiscal 25 revenues, while in other cases, the agency reported that it had not been paid at all. MSDE should provide an update on reconciling the discrepancies in revenue received and recovering any remaining accrued revenue entries. Moreover, OLA received referrals to its waste, fraud, and abuse hotline alleging that MSDE awarded $1.2 million in grants and contracts without a competitive process. In one instance, MSDE non-competitively awarded $700,000 to a vendor and paid the full sum upfront, but later could not provide documentation that any of the contracted services had been provided. There were several other instances of MSDE awarding smaller non-competitive contracts and receiving little to no proof of services in return. As a result, OLA referred its concerns to the Office of the Attorney General's Criminal Division. Finding 11 of OLA's report indicated that MSDE also failed to process reimbursement requests from the 21st Century Community Learning Center in a timely manner. This program provides after-school, before-school, and summer educational programs for students in high poverty and low-performing public schools. Auditors identified that between January 2023 and May 2025, it took MSDE more than 100 days to pay $10.1 million in reimbursements, with some requests sitting for nearly a year. MSDE should provide an update on the status of its corrective actions in response to the audit. DLS is recommending adding budget bill language restricting $100,000 pending a report describing how MSDE has implemented OLA feedback and corrective actions for hiring and licensing oversight, financial management, and timely reimbursements. Issue 2 begins at the bottom of page 17 and discusses the rollout of MSDE's new literacy policy. MSDE's policy establishes an evidence-based framework for literacy instruction, early identification of reading challenges, intervention, and grade promotion decisions. The agency plans to screen all students in kindergarten through grade 3 times a year to proactively identify students who may face challenges with reading. Those students will then receive a diagnostic assessment and an individualized student reading improvement plan, or SRIP. Starting in the 26-27 school year, LEAs will be required to implement personalized SRIPs to support students in kindergarten through 3rd grade. Then, beginning in the 27-28 school year, 3rd graders must meet reading benchmarks to move on to 4th grade. These changes are being implemented using $47.2 million in federal and nonprofit grants, and MSD has awarded subgrants to 15 LEAs as of summer 2025. MSDE should provide an update on any changes to this timeline or the implementation plan for the new literacy policy. Issue 3 begins on the bottom of page 19 with a discussion of MCAP assessment contract costs. Exhibit 5 on the next page shows costs over 3 years, with the fiscal 27 allowance including $54.9 million for MCAP contracts. As you can see in the exhibit, MCAP contracts have required significant deficiency appropriations for 2 years in a row. MSDE received a $10 million deficiency appropriation in fiscal 25 and $12.2 million in fiscal 26, representing nearly a quarter of the total appropriation for each year. The agency should discuss the reason for the increase in assessment costs and the agency's efforts to reduce expenses. The last issue in this analysis discusses the School Safety Fund. Exhibit 6 on page 21 shows school safety grant funding from fiscal 24 to 27. The fiscal 27 allowance includes $16.6 million for grants and $3.7 million for operations. The grant budget includes $6 million in general funds and $10.6 million in special funds. $13 million will ultimately support the School Resource Officer Grant Program. For several years, MCSS has reported large SSF balance amounts citing low LEA utilization. MCSS should comment on how much of the fiscal 26 special fund appropriation it actually expects will be spent. DLS recommends adopting committee narrative requesting that MCSS submit a report on the SSF balance, obstacles to utilization and LEA participation, and potential solutions. Notably, the allowance does not contain funds for the Secure Schools Emergency Response Grant Program, which MCSS is required to establish by September 2026. The agency should discuss its plans to establish the program by the mandated deadline, including the program's funding source. Recommended actions start on page 23, and the section starting on page 28 has an update on major IT projects, as well as MFR measures for MCSS and the Maryland Longitudinal Data System Center. That concludes my presentation, and I can take any questions now.
Dr. Wright, come on up. Did you have a question with the analyst? Go ahead.
Appreciate such a thorough review, but when I start to add things up, I don't know exactly if you did this, but when we talk about federal funds that were not recovered by lack of, doing things on a timely fashion or not filling out the paper, what is the total amount of money for this last year that we potentially have lost?
I would need to look at my documents. I don't have that number in front of me. I will say that the audit doesn't reflect this past fiscal year. I believe it's fiscal 23 and 24, but I can get that number to you.
Thank you very much. I'd appreciate it.
Dr. Wright, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. It's nice to be here. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm Carrie Wright, State Superintendent of Schools. And with me today are Donna Gunning, Chief Financial Officer, and Krishna Tallur, Chief Operating Officer. And there are representatives from the Maryland Center for School Safety and MLDS to also answer questions in the audience as well. I want to take a moment to thank you for your support and commitment to education and to thank Ms. Barber for her thorough analysis. We appreciate that. Maryland's support for public education is the envy of the nation. When we travel across the country and engage with those state leaders, Maryland stands out for its sustained commitment. Sure can. Let me do this. How about that? All right. When we travel across the country and engage with those state leaders, Maryland stands out for its sustained commitment, its willingness to follow the evidence, and its focus on long-term outcomes rather than short-term fixes. That is due in large part to the partnership and collaboration of this body. The State Board has set a goal for Maryland to rank among the top 10 states in reading on 4th and 8th grade NAEP assessments. And over the past 2 years, we have begun to see some meaningful progress in student literacy and mathematics achievement. The percentage of students scoring proficient or advanced in English language arts increased from 45.3 in 2023 to 50.8 in 2025. And in mathematics, proficiency increased from 21 to 26.5. Low-income students' scores increased by 11 percentage points. This progress reflects a renewed focus on the instructional core, strong teaching, high-quality materials, and engaged students in classrooms across Maryland. The State Board and the Maryland Department of Education serve as proud stewards of the blueprint for Maryland's future. Our commitment to the blueprint's success is reflected in our new Maryland Momentum Strategic Plan. The new plan aligns all departmental goals and strategies directly to the blueprint's pillars. Our strategic plan emphasizes evidence-based strategies, targeted investments in students with the greatest needs, and preparing Maryland students for long-term economic success. It follows the blueprint structure and is organized around the same 5 pillars. And here are some of our highlights. 74% increase in the number of children with access to high-quality full-day pre-kindergarten program. We have placed 14 coaches in Prince George's County Public Schools through a philanthropic support in the advance of the Academic Excellence Program Teachers Rollout. $19.4 million Grow Your Own Educator Grant Program, which is guidance and application that have been released to LEAs and higher ed. And more than 50% of schools in the state are implementing the community schools model. After nearly 2 years of work, the Assessment and Accountability Task Force provided direction for a Maryland school report card that better rewards schools for academic growth, increases fairness for schools serving under-resourced communities, and makes schools' composite scores more easily understandable to educators and the public. In the fall of 2025, the department issued an RFP for a brand-new statewide assessment system that incorporates all of the components of the system into one contract. The streamlined approach to a new contract allows for efficiencies and cost savings. The Board of Public Works approved a 5-year contract with NCS Pearson at the end of January. We have more to do as we seek to capitalize on the sustained statewide progress, and we look forward to continuing these efforts with the partnership of the Governor and the General Assembly. MSDE's responses to the analyst-specific questions are in our testimony, and MSDE agrees with the analyst recommendations. We are here to answer any of your questions.
Okay. I have a list of the questions, and I assume they're all in your testimony, but I haven't gotten to read up on all of those.
Our response?
I'm sorry?
In our response?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. I think all of these probably are in the response, would you guess? I mean, do we need to discuss any of these today?
Depends if you would like more information about.
Senator Bailey, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the other day, we had a hearing with the Inspector General for Education. And the Inspector General pointed out that in the last year, they had found or been able to help recover $100 million of funds that were unaccounted for, improperly used, things like that. And he said that one thing that was very striking to me is he said that the amount of complaints in just this year had gone up 42% from the year before, dealing with MSDE. And his concern was the fact that many of the county school systems had then stopped working and cooperating with them, where they were requiring them to then go through the legal process to get subpoenas and any other legal documents to be able to release any data. And I was curious if you were able to respond to that and what we're doing to get those counties to be able to be cooperative with any investigation that their office might have.
So this is news to me. This wasn't a stat that I'm familiar with. And I do know that I've worked very closely with the Inspector General during my tenure here, and he and I have established a very good working relationship in terms of him giving me heads up about things that are occurring, us sharing information back and forth. Legally, I would need to default to our AGs on this because I don't know the legality that we as an agency possess in forcing a local school system to produce materials for the Inspector General. Now, and so I would need to look into that, to be honest with you, Senator Bailey.
Thank you for that. And I obviously don't want to put you in a uncomfortable situation with that if that's what we need to do. But we're dealing with taxpayer money.
Absolutely.
Right? And
Absolutely.
if we're talking about education and accountability, then we want to make sure that we are doing the right thing when it comes to that. And I don't know, I don't think it was in your tenure. I think it was right before your tenure. But, you know, when we created that office, the part that concerns me is MSDE cut that funding for that entire budget.
Which budget, sir?
For the Office of the Inspector General for Education.
Wasn't it transferred to another agency?
Yes.
Yeah, it was transferred.
It wasn't cut from our budget. The OIGE's office moved to its own separate state entity, so their budget moved with them.
So their budget moved, okay, so when
Yes.
it was taken from you, it just went to
Correct.
them? Okay, I definitely appreciate that because
Sure.
I was under the impression that that had not been the case. But if you would be so kind as to get back to us about the
Absolutely.
fact of his response that they had gone up 42%.
I'll be happy to do that.
Right, because we see that OLA had an increase in the amount of calls that they had about this. And my last question, Madam Chair, was just related to the fact of the education. Is there an education requirement for the chief financial officers in each one of the counties that are handling the school system's budgets?
A requirement for what?
I mean, are they a financial professional?
Oh, you might be able to answer that, Don.
Off the top of my head, I don't know what their individual qualifications are.
Is there a requirement that they
don't believe there
reach?
is.
I don't think so. I think some of them are probably, budget analysts or have been budget analysts or budget managers of some kind. But I don't know if the CFO role specifically has a requirement that you must have the following education or the following sets of work experiences.
But we're talking about one of the biggest parts of our entire
Absolutely.
budget.
I totally agree with you.
Right?
So I can tell you what we do with them. Donna meets with them on a regular basis, and maybe you want to talk about that process so that we know how we're all looped in.
Right, so we meet with all 24 chief finance officers twice a month to discuss issues they have and things that we need, collaborate on topics that are important to them, share information and timing of due dates and things like that. And in that work, I feel like that really connects the department with the 24 LEAs from that fiscal side of the house. We're also working very closely on the Blueprint's minimum school funding requirement and the implementation of that requirement at the local level in terms of allocating resources at the school level. So that's been the bulk of our work.
Also, we've also been implementing that Power School system so that you will be able to know with the minimum school funding. That was a requirement. Last year was the beta year, so that when the data were collected, that's every school, right down to each individual account has to be accounted for in this larger system. And eventually, we're working with that now. It will become public facing so that you would be able to go in and click on a district, a school, whatever, and be able to know how the money is being allocated within that school. So that was something that we were charged with from the Blueprint, and we're in the process of working on that as we speak. So that will be more transparent, to your point, about what's happening across the state, and a lot more accountability because it is going to be public facing.
I appreciate your question, Madam Chair. This is clearly, when we look at transparency, we talk about accountability, and we look at the 24 jurisdictions, and we look at the amount of money that they each have. I mean, we're talking future 500 businesses, right? And the fact that we require for somebody to sit in a classroom, them to have a certain degree of education, right, to teach a teacher. If they're going to teach this, but if they're going to use the taxpayers' money, right, they don't have to have a certain standard of education when it comes to being able to be a financial manager. That is clearly something that I think that we should address. I would openly look at some type of recommendation from you of a minimum education requirement for that position, and I think that that would be something that we should look at post haste.
We had another issue about a childcare that I needed to talk to you about, and I didn't bring it with me, so I'm going to call you.
That'd be great. I'd appreciate that. I'd appreciate that. One thing I did want to say as we're leaving is that we've really taken all of this feedback very seriously. And I noted that you noted the deficiencies that have been with the assessment system. And prior to my arrival, there were a lot of changes to the scope of work inside these contracts. And you and I both know anytime you change a scope of work, it's more money. So we have installed a process inside. This is just one of many that we've installed, but one of the processes now, there is no going to be any change of scope of work without my signature. So
Okay.
that's lifted all the way up. So that's just one of the things. And also, now that we have all of this under one contract for our statewide assessment system, you can look to see a great deal of savings that's coming through that as
Okay,
well. And
so
that was
that's
one of
all-
our goals.
that's all
Yes.
straightened out then?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, very good. I have faith in you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, is Jamessa Fawcett Williams here? Sarah Mickey? I didn't see you back there. Krishna Talur, Donna Gunning. Okay, you're signed up as a regular witness. Deborah Miller?
She had to go to a funeral.
Okay, and the rest is all written. Okay, go ahead.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Jamesa Fawcett Williams, and I'm proud to serve as the president of ASME Local 3644, representing the dedicated employees of Maryland State Department of Education. Our members work every day to support Maryland students, child care providers, and the disabled by administering critical programming, overseeing grants, and ensuring compliance with state and federal requirements. While we may not be in classrooms, our work directly impacts the most vulnerable residents of the state of Maryland. As you review this budget, I respectfully urge that you protect the funding for MSDE operations and ensure fair, competitive compensation for the skilled professionals who keep our education system running. We are asking for a 2% COLA and a step increase so that we can hire and retain more staff. Right now, I have a caseload of 430 pre-employment transition cases. I'm assigned to 35 schools, and I assist students with documented disabilities transition into their next phase of life. Many times, I have to advocate for them at their IEP meetings and make sure they are getting the correct accommodations. I meet with our vendors to connect the students with services. I do outreach in a community to make them aware of the services we offer. And I also have over 50 referrals that are separate from my caseload currently that I am waiting to determine to be eligible for services. I care about our students like they're my very own. I wish there were either more of me or I wish I had a smaller caseload so that I could provide more intentional services. This is just one program under MSDE, but other programs struggle with similar resources. Please support us hardworking state employees so that we can support the vulnerable residents who rely on us for services. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you, good job.
Hi. Hi, good afternoon, Chair King, members of the subcommittee. I'm Sarah Mirsky-Mickey. I'm the Deputy Director of the Baltimore Jewish Council, which represents the Associated Jewish Community Federation of Baltimore and all of its agencies. Here favorable with amendment for one specific part of the budget, which is the Hate Crimes Prevention Grant. I'm here also under the preview of the 4 Jewish Federation systems within Maryland. We have asked for a $2 million increase for this program from $3 million to $5 million for this program for 3 specific reasons.
And what does that do, that program?
The program gives personnel and security infrastructure upgrades for child care centers and schools at risk of hate crimes.
Okay.
So over the past 2 years, the center has received each year over $6 million in requests, and we've had $3 million to give out. Additionally, up until this current fiscal year, schools and child care centers were eligible to apply to GoCap's Protecting Against Hate Crimes grant, which is funded at $10 million. But due to changes at that grant, they are no longer eligible to apply. And the third reason is that there are major changes at the federal level around the Homeland Security grants, where basically any institution that has ever received funding since 2005 is likely to no longer receive funding unless there are changes. It works on a 40-point rubric, and it now gives a 15-point advantage to anyone who has never received funding before. This has never happened since 2005. Some years are like, 5 points if you're new for 1 year, but then you go back into that point advantage system. So for those reasons, we ask for an increase. And just to give you a quick personal, my kids' child care providers, my daycare, we have security guards, and if those guards are full-time and accounted for, it would, and we didn't have that funding, it would cost each family of our small daycare $2,000 to $3,000 per a family, which is really unaffordable for most, in addition to the cost of childcare. So if we asked for the
It's a
$2
shame that we're
million.
having to even deal with that, but
Yes.
it seems like it's not getting better, so.
It's not, and costs are increasing as well for
Yeah,
these things.
sad but true.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. There's no one else on my list here for MSDE, correct? Okay, thank you. Okay, next we have the Department of General Services. Yashadari Rai is our budget analyst, and we have Secretary Atif Chowdhury. Okay, we'll have the analyst go first. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, committee members. I am Yashodhara Rai, and I'll be presenting the fiscal 27 budget analysis for the Department of General Services, or DGS. The chart on page 1 shows that the total fiscal 27 budget for DGS increases by 4% to about $207 million. This is after accounting for the fiscal 26 proposed deficiencies and contingent appropriation in fiscal 27. To highlight some of the performance measures, Exhibit 1 on page 6 discusses procurements. Ongoing data integrity issues related to the Financial Management Information System to eMaryland Marketplace Advantage EMA procurement system has resulted in the unavailability of the data for DGS's goal of completing 80% of large procurement within 90 days since fiscal 21. This is represented by the yellow line. Another procurement goal is to combine procurements into one larger procurement. Despite this goal, the new procurements, which are the red bars, have increased by 14.4% from fiscal 24 to fiscal 25. The number of statewide contracts has increased by 56.7% in fiscal 25. DGS should comment on the increased level of new procurement. Exhibit 2 on page 7 shows that minority and women-owned business enterprise MBE participation in the department's total procurement spending was at 25.2% in fiscal 25. This is the highest between fiscal 2019 and 25. However, this still falls short of attaining the statewide goal of 29%. DGS should comment on its outreach activities and plans to reach the targeted 29% goal. The bottom of page 7 discusses energy consumption by state agencies. This data is accessible through a public dashboard on DGS's website. Only 61% of the total statewide facilities have completed data on this database, and DGS should comment on the timeline to complete transition of the entire state agencies. Exhibit 3 on page 8 shows that the statewide facilities' annual energy cost was $272.8 million in fiscal 25 and is $116 million as of January 26. Exhibit 4 on page 9 shows the same data, just split by commodity. Exhibit 5 on page 10 shows that utilization of energy performance contracts, EPCs, have remained constant at 19 in both fiscal 24 and 25. Although Chapter 247 of 2022 extended the maximum EPC lease term from 15 to 30 years, DGS advises that the department does not expect many projects to have a 30-year lease. DGS should comment on its efforts to increase uses of EPCs. DGS also submitted a status report on EPCs, which was as required by 2025 JCR. The report noted that 20 projects are currently in verification stage, with the most recent EPC starting construction phase in calendar 2018. The report did not, however, provide specific contract details. One of the reasons for declining EPCs is that many of these EPCs were launched during 2010 calendar years, and are now ending, but this also provides an opportunity for newer EPCs to be developed. Some of the barriers that were highlighted in the report were promoting benefits, were staffing, lower returns, and restricted access to excess savings. DGS recommended promoting benefits of EPCs by allowing an agency or EPC to reinvest savings, a mixed funding model to integrate planned capital with energy savings. Also, DGS has issued a decarbonization policy, and contractual services are level funded at $1.2 million each in fiscal 26 and 27. DGS should provide an update on the work related to the decarbonization planning and estimated completion timeline. Beginning at the bottom of page 11, our fiscal 26 proposed deficiency appropriations for a total of $9 million in general funds. This includes a total of $6.1 million for facility maintenance and repairs, which further includes $5 million to fund critical maintenance and repairs, and $1.1 million to fund emergency facility repairs. Of the $5 million in critical maintenance, $1.3 million is for facility maintenance at 1100 North Utah Street in Baltimore City, and $1.1 million for the William Donald Schaefer building renovations. Because these expenditures are eligible to be funded by the Facilities Renewal Fund, DLS recommends reducing the $5 million proposed deficiency by a total of $2.4 million for the two projects, and instead fund these through the Facilities Renewal Fund. Other proposed deficiency appropriations include $2.3 million for personnel expenses, about $385,000 for security upgrades, about $307,000 to add 7 new Maryland Capitol Police positions, $100,000 for new grant management system, annual maintenance fee, and a negative deficiency of $77,000 to transfer 1 position. Exhibit 6 on page 13 shows the fiscal 27 allowance distributed across 8 units, with facilities-related units accounting for 80% of the total budget. The Office of External Affairs, which accounts for 1% of the total fiscal 27 allowance, is a newly established division that serves as the department's legislative liaison and manages all DGS communications. Exhibit 7 on pages 14 and 15 show the proposed budget change of $7.9 million in fiscal 27 as compared to fiscal 26. This change is attributable to a contingent appropriation of $20 million, which is partially offset by $2.6 million in use of the dedicated purpose account, funding for state center relocation project, and a reduction in reimbursable fund for MIT project for about $7.6 million. There's a $20 million contingent appropriation related to a provision in the Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act of 2026. This provision authorizes the governor to use compliance fees deposited into the Strategic Energy Investment Fund for grants and loans to support creation of new Tier 1 renewable energy sources for fiscal 27 through 31. DGS states that this fund will be used to subsidize costs to install solar installations at state-owned facilities and use energy savings to implement EPCs. DGS should brief on the selection criteria for the facilities, estimated timeline, and estimated annual energy savings, and DLS recommends adopting committee narrative for a report requesting similar details on the projects. Personnel data appears on pages 16 and 17. 5 positions were abolished due to the voluntary separation program. The fiscal 27 allowance includes an increase of 17 regular positions and reduces contractual full-time equivalents by 20 positions. Of the 17 new positions, 15 are contractual conversions, and the remaining 2 new positions are DGS Procurement Office apprentices. As of December 31st, 2025, there are 59 vacant positions. Of these, which excludes the 2 new positions added in fiscal 27. Of these 59 vacant positions, 52 have been vacant for less than a year, and 7 positions have been vacant for more than a year. DGS also submitted a status report as required by 2025 JCR on the 80.5 vacant positions that were reported in last year's analysis. DGS reported conducting 6 recruitment projects that resulted in filling most of the vacant positions, and only 5 positions remain vacant. DGS should comment on the status of the 5 remaining positions that were still vacant. Exhibit 8 on page 17 shows vacancies from January 2017 to January 2026, and the vacancy rate decreases by 2.9 percentage points in January 2026 when compared to January 2025. Moving on to issues, Exhibit 9 on page 19 shows the status of the State Center relocation project. Of the 12 agencies occupying the State Center complex, 7 agencies have relocated, with 1 agency scheduled to complete relocation in March of this year. All the remaining agencies are scheduled to complete relocation by the first quarter of calendar 2027. Exhibit 10 on page 21 shows that of the $60 million in the DPA, which was set aside to support State Center relocation costs, $41.2 million have been spent. No additional cost for the Maryland Department of Health is anticipated as the agency's operating lease is converted into a capital lease. DGS should comment on the revised estimated remaining cost for the completion of the State Center relocation now that MDH is no longer included. DLS recommends a committee narrative requesting biannual reports on the State Center relocation project. Page 22 highlights some of the audit findings reported by the Office of Legislative Audits, OLA, that was released on July 7, 2025. These audit findings highlighted deficiencies in DGS's due diligence and transparency when evaluating whether relocating the agencies from the State Center complex into a state-owned facility or a privately leased facility was in the state's best interest. This led to the state entering into lease agreements totaling about $411 million. The audit also reported that DGS failed to provide complete information on leases to the Board of Public Works, and also reported inconsistencies in DGS's evaluation of lease proposals in compliance with the regulatory requirements. DLS recommends restricting funds pending submission of a report on assessment of the state's asset maximization strategies. Exhibit 11 on page 24 shows that the overall cost of the critical maintenance backlogs reduced from $23.6 million to $23.2 million. The fiscal 27 allowance includes $10 million in general funds to support the program, which is consistent with recent annual funding levels. There are currently a total of 246 projects in critical maintenance backlog. DGS evaluates and prioritizes projects in 5 categories, with 1 being the highest. While there are no highest priority projects in fiscal 27, the priority 4 projects that require restoring their original design effectiveness have increased by 41.7%, and priority 2 projects have reduced by 70%. DLS recommends adopting a committee narrative for the submission of a report on the critical maintenance backlog projects. The third issue, which is the submittable grant management system, is discussed on pages 24 and 25. DGS launched a new centralized grants management system in October of 2024. Language in the 2025 budget bill restricted $150,000 in general funds pending submission of a report on the implementation of this new management system. DGS submitted its report in December 2025 and noted that the implementation of the new system has reduced grant intake review time from over 6 months to under 30 days. There are about 2,200 grantee accounts and about 5,400 active grants that spans from fiscal 2019 to 2026. 6 regular and 5 contractual positions are operating the new system. DLS has determined that the report is in compliance with the language and recommends $150,000 in withheld general funds to be released. DLS will process a letter if no objections are raised by the committees during the hearings. The last issue is on pages 25 and 26, which highlights DGS's procurement modernization efforts. The executive order signed in December 2024 and Chapter 601 of 2025 streamlined and centralized procurement process with some notable provisions like expanding contract threshold for the Small Business Reserve Program, more flexibility to adjust MBE and veterans-owned small business enterprise participation goals, faster payment timelines, and mandatory oral presentation to evaluate procurements. As part of 2025 JCR submission, DGS noted that certain provisions like expansion of the SBR program and MBE and VSBE reporting forms were updated. Other provisions like faster payment, inclusion of registered apprenticeship and internship programs were ongoing. The OLA also conducted a fiscal compliance audit of the Office of State Procurement, which was released on December 19th of 2025. The audit findings highlighted inefficient management of the original EMA project, which resulted in termination of the contract, and state paying 85% of the contract amount, which was not recovered from the vendor. This resulted in a new contract for EMA with KPMG. Instances where state procurement regulations were not followed were also highlighted in the audit findings. DGS should comment on projected timeline to complete implementation of the ongoing modernization process and how these audit findings will be addressed through these processes. Pages 27 to 31 are DLS recommendations. Recommendations 1 and 2 are standard budget bill language that restricts fund pending status of corrective actions related to the most recent audit findings. Recommendation 3 adds specificity to the budget bill contingent language to align more closely with the BRFA provision. Recommendation 4 restricts fund pending submission of a report on maximization strategies for state assets. Recommendations 5 to 7 are committee narrative requesting various reports. Recommendation 8 reduces fiscal 26 deficiency appropriation by $2.4 million for 2 critical maintenance projects. Pages 32 to 42 are appendices. This is the end of my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great job.
Thank you.
Okay, we have no questions of the analyst before we get started. I guess we're okay, huh? Okay, can I have Secretary Atif Chowdhury?
Madam Chair.
Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. How are you?
Good.
Good. So, Madam Chair, esteemed members of the committee, for the record, my name is Atif Chowdhury, Secretary of the Maryland Department of General Services. To my left here is Joe Sedtal, Deputy Secretary for the agency, as well as Willie Chow, our Chief Financial Officer. I want to start by thanking members of the committee for the continued support of the agency over the years, and also want to thank our DLS analyst, Yasha Rai, for her commitment to understanding our core mission while providing a strong overview of our agency in her analysis. Throughout the year, DGS has remained steadfast in its mission to support state agency partners and advance their initiatives. Our offices and the staff of nearly 800 dedicated DGS employees continue to deliver vital services that support all 3 branches of state government and impact every corner of our great state. In the last year alone, DGS has completed the State House exterior grounds and renovation project, including the reopening of the old Treasury building, which is the oldest surviving public building in the state, to be open to the public for the first time in decades. We've played a critical role in the Governor Moore's government modernization initiative, resulting in millions of dollars in long-term savings for Maryland taxpayers. We also made history with the passage of the Procurement Reform Act of 2025 to modernize state procurement across state government. And we've graduated our first ever Maryland Capitol Police recruitment class with cadets that we've put through the academy. We've also earned national recognition for procuring over 29,000 new green certified products for the state and installed over 123 new EV charging stations statewide. We've completed construction of a new state-of-the-art Mabel Hubbard District Court in Baltimore City. We've completed 189 projects valued at $128 million and have managed over 550 projects valued at over $3.1 billion. And that includes the construction of our new Supreme Court here in Annapolis, which I'm happy to announce will have a groundbreaking next week. In the DLS analysis, there were 8 operating budget recommendations or recommended actions. DGS concurs with all of them except for one, and that is the recommendation to reduce the fiscal year 26 deficiency appropriation for critical maintenance projects by $2.4 million and to fund these projects through the facility renewal program. DGS respectfully disagrees, and the reason we do is because the facility renewal program is funded through bond funds that require a 15-year shelf life for the project, so a 15-year lifespan for the project, for project viability. And neither of the projects that are mentioned in the analysis for the $2.4 million, both 1100 North Utah Street and 6 St. Paul Street, will be under state ownership for that period of time. So DGS will be divesting of these properties within the next couple of years. So we don't think it'll meet the bond requirements or a 15-year lifespan. Therefore, we're happy to, we've already notified our DLS analysis. We're happy to coordinate offline on some creative options to continue to fund those projects. In the interest of time, our written testimony here is before you today on the 9 elements that DLS asked us to comment on. We're happy to hit the highlights of those, Madam Chair, or just answer any questions you may have.
Wouldn't mind just hit the highlights.
Sure, I'll hit a couple of them. First, I'll hit Madam Chair. We were asked to comment on the reason for increased number of procurements, and I would say that agency procurements across state government are really driven by agency needs, funding, legal mandates as well. So there's a natural fluctuation in number of procurements that we have each year. The number of contracts ending each year, for instance, will help stipulate the number of contracts that we'll be procuring each year. So, it's not, while we are doing very strategic statewide procurement initiatives, that doesn't necessarily mean that there won't be agency-specific procurements that still will be required. So very much ebb and flow number of procurements that we do each year, and we do balance that with policy considerations regarding contracting and the number and types of contracts we do to make sure we have support for minority, women, small, veteran-owned businesses as well. We were asked to comment on outreach activities to reach our 29% MBE goal. I'm very happy to report that the agency has worked diligently to hit 25.2% MBE goal participation. That is the highest level we have hit since 2015. While we have not yet hit our goal of 29% statewide, we're working diligently to do so. We've got enhanced procurement review oversight. We're reviewing procurements more diligently to make sure that goals are set wherever applicable. While not every contract will have a goal, we're going to make sure we examine them to make sure where they are applicable, we can implement them. We're engaging the industry more early as well. We're surveying them, engaging with them to see which procurements they'd be willing to do, MBEs would be willing to participate in, and which ones they would not be able to participate in, whether it's geography or complexity or size and scope of the project, and use of requests for information as well to make sure we're able to do that as well. So. And then I will just hit one more, which is the low utilization of energy performance contracts. While DGS strongly, utilize them and likes to utilize energy performance contracts, we're happy to report that we do have a pre-proposal meeting right now to establish another energy performance contract, a large-scale one, and we have an educational event scheduled in March to help educate agencies on the benefits of the energy performance contracts and how we can better utilize them. And then there's good news and bad news with this, Madam Chair. The good news is we are being very strategic in meeting Climate Solutions Now Act and other goals for sustainability within our state government. So we're replacing our aging HVAC equipment with more energy efficient ones and ones that are fully electrified that do not burn fossil fuel. That's good news. The bad news is that means we are already addressing all the things that normally would go into an energy performance contract, and therefore it's making it a little more challenging to find projects that will meet the size and scope and the components that will for an energy performance contract. So we're working through that process now, hoping to have additional ones, and low-hanging fruit like LED lighting and some of the HVAC systems I mentioned are something that allowing us to be a little more creative, and that includes coordinating with MEA for some subsidies to provide additional projects, including solar panels as well in some of our facilities. So. Happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Okay. Senator Quarterman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary, appreciate the thorough report and appreciate everyone being here today. Just want to follow up a little bit, and some of maybe a little bit of what you just addressed there now, but I wanted to kind of hone in on 2 things. First being the audit findings. They're in the back here. There's 2 different audits here that are referenced. The first one, there's some overlap obviously from the previous administration to this administration, so understanding those are some issues that are outside of probably your hands and understand that.
Sure.
But the next audit finding is pretty much right within this time period from November 1st to January 31st, 21 to 25. 8 findings, 4 repeat findings, unsatisfactory. So it seems like we're not really learning from our mistakes. We're kind of repeating some of these things. A lot of them do have to do with some procurement issues that you just mentioned as well. But I guess the question would be is, we've had 2 pretty, I'll just be honest, horrific audit findings here with DGS. Again, some of the previous administration, some with you guys. What are we doing here going forward so the next audit that we have done doesn't look like this?
Thank you very much, Senator. Appreciate the question. And, from my perspective, regardless of whether it happened under the prior administration or under this administration, our goal is to make sure, at least my goal is that there's no repeat findings. Sure. So working diligently, I can tell you, Senator, that DGS in its history has never had a compliance unit within our agency. We've never had a compliance officer. I hired, last year, hired the agency's first chief compliance officer for the agency. Unfortunately, she started right smack dab in the middle of our procurement by the time we were able to hire her, bring her on board. However, I'm looking to expand that unit as well to make sure not only are we able to follow up on these existing audits as well as be proactive as well. So working very diligently behind the scenes to do that. I mean, on the off-state procurement procurement, there's a lot of initiatives that we have taken that have already put wheels in motion to address a lot of these and holistically, some of the audit findings we've already addressed during the audit period. Other ones are currently we're addressing or have currently already addressed. So working very diligently with the team behind the scenes to make sure we absolutely take these seriously. And my goal is no repeat findings going forward.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate you bringing in the compliance officer, which hopefully that will provide some guardrails there going forward. The second thing, Madam Chair, I just want to touch on real quick was in regards to constituent services.
Sure.
We've had the opportunity, again, I appreciate you and your staff making time to have conversations. I think we all have kind of a shared frustration here sometimes in regards to legislative bond initiatives, things of that nature, capital grants, things like that, trying to get the money back out the door to the folks in our home communities. And, again, we've had a conversation here most recently. I guess I'll get right to it, the submittable, right? Sure. And, the new system was supposed to cure all the ails of the old system, and quite frankly, the new systems so far to date has been just as bad, if not worse, than the old system. And I guess when I say that, I want to just hone in on one thing, and it's a constituent actually sent it to us after our meeting. We did send it on to your office. You may or may not have seen this. I'm just going to read this here, Madam Chair. This is for a constituent in our district in regards to grant. Quote, the challenge is that everything is submitted through a platform called Submittable. Staff review submissions as they get to them and provide comments when needed. But all communication happens through the platform. There's no primary contact. Multiple staff members may work on the same project without knowing its history. In the past, we had a regional staff member we could reach out to directly. While spreading the workload among the team sounds good in theory, in practice it has slowed the process for grantees. So I guess what I'm getting at, again, we've had some of these conversations of trying to be, and you said it in the last statement, about being proactive. And I guess if there's an opportunity here going forward of being proactive with some of these grant opportunities with our local communities, I think that would be very helpful. If there's an opportunity to have regional staff members that could assist folks, I think it's what people look for. People look for a point of contact, right? And when there's an issue and you go online and it just doesn't really give a whole lot of information, they're trying to get somebody. And usually by the time they get somebody, they get a hold of one of our offices, and then we in turn get with you guys. And usually by that time, you are able to help, but we're trying to alleviate, that issue. We want it to not be an issue, right? Because we always hear about when there's an issue, the less calls we get, the better, right? Because the less calls that we get mean that the system is working and the constituents are being handled in a timely and appropriate manner. So if you could just comment to that as far as if is there going to be an opportunity in the future to maybe have some proactive staff contact that people would be able to reach out to, as opposed to just looking at a system online that quite frankly I think you've agreed with doesn't really give all the necessary information that someone may be looking for.
Thank you very much, Senator. I will tell you, when I walked into this job, the current process for grants was completely 100% email-based. The vast majority of the inquiries that we received, information and submissions were buried in emails. Email inboxes, they were buried on shared drives, they were buried on people's computers. The vast majority of the inquiries that we received, I would say upwards of 80% or more, what's the status of my grant? That would take a grant administrator to stop what they're doing, stop processing grants, dig through emails and paper files and shared folders to get the current status and then report that back to a grantee. That's what I sort of walked into. We've implemented, Senator, is a grant management system holistically. Everything is in one location. There'll be consolidated checks and balances. We put dashboards online as well, too, so the grantees are aware and legislators are aware of that, where we are in the grant process, sort of the Domino's pizza tracker, so to speak, where you can track your status of a grant. It also allows for the capability there to store not just all the information, but correspondence as well. And Senator, I will agree, when we first rolled this out, where there was some growing pains, I'll admit to it, and then we sort of changed that model to make sure that we have more opportunity, not just a submission in the system, but you can call someone, you can email someone, you can get a hold of someone that they can reach out back to you. And and the reason, Senator, we had everything in one consolidated place was due to staff turnover, where you had all the institutional knowledge on the grant with one person, that person leaves, everything wasn't in their inbox, we had to dig through it now to get back up to speed. So having cross-training staff, allowing them to do that is certainly something that we were doing to make sure we've got better capability to continue on when people are out of the office, so there's nothing is missed in the mix. But I agree with you 100%, Senator. White glove service is our goal. White glove service for all of our grantees to make sure they know that what we're doing, and you hit the nail on the head, sir, there, being proactive. Not just waiting for grantees to submit their submission. We are going to go after grantees to pursue them, to make sure they come to us and engage with us to activate the grants, move them forward, and move them through the process. So very, very much in the queue right now. We've hired a new assistant secretary over our capital grants unit, as well as being very proactive in that regard. So I agree 100%, Senator. We'll keep you updated as we move through that process. But white glove service, being proactive and make sure that we've got points of contact and be able to be accessible is the thing that we want to make sure that all grants have the opportunity. And I was speaking with Senator Bailey earlier today. I want to make sure that anyone, regardless of their computer literacy, has an opportunity to engage with us, whether it's a phone call, whether it's an email, whether it's setting up a meeting with us to engage with us. We're happy to do that and engage with them to really change the dynamic and make sure folks are aware. And we've been working on this through the month, Senator, and we're continuing to improve on that, but you'll see a lot more improved service.
Now, and I appreciate that, especially to be able to have that direct contact. I think that hopefully as you're continuing to enhance the system,
yes,
because the goal and the objective of the system is so that you don't have to have it, because again, it's probably impossible to have enough people to answer the phones all the time for all the grantees.
Right.
But I think the challenge with the submittable a lot of times is, as you said, kind of that track of the Domino's thing.
Right.
If it just says it's baking in the oven all the time,
right.
Well, when am I getting the pizza? Right.
Right.
And so when it just says in process all the time,
right.
So I guess continue to enhance that maybe with other steps along the way, and something that would reach back to folks to kind of maybe put, again, back to the grantee of things they need to do, because it just seems to be a little limbo. So I know you're working on it. I appreciate the proactive approach, and hopefully we'll be better off next time we meet.
Thanks, Senator. We're looking at that as well, as coordinating with the team. Not to keep using the Domino's analogy, but how long is it going to bake? So in the timeline, give estimated time so people are aware it's going to take.
I mean, they get 30 minutes or less, so I mean, you better step up your game.
Yeah. I wish we would be that fast.
Understood.
But we're working on it. Thank you, Senator, for your question.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Senator Bailey, you're good? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bernadette McAdams and Denise Gilmore. Welcome. Haven't seen you yet this year.
My name is Bernadette McAdams. I am a member of ASME Local 1535. I serve in the Security Division of the Department of General Services. I am here to advocate for emergency pay for essential employees. During the recent winter storm, I reported to work while much of the state was shut down. I come in on Friday and stayed until Monday. I was away from my husband, my grandkids, and the entire time. The highest of the storm began on the weekend, yet the state only paid emergency premiums for Monday, January 26, 10 a.m. through Tuesday, January 27, 10 a.m. Those of us who worked overnight and throughout the weekend during the most dangerous conditions were not included. Maryland operates 24 hours a day. Essential employees do not work only 9 to 5. When agencies close, other teleworkers remain on site, protecting state buildings and ensuring security even in the hazardous weather. A state of emergency does not begin in during the business hours, or emergency compensation should not enter emergency pay applied to all hours. Work by essential employees during declared emergencies. We are asking you for your help to make sure budgets are not balanced off of the backs of essential employees who report to work during state emergencies.
Thank you.
Thanks. My name is Denise Gilmore. I'm a legislative and political director with AFSCME Maryland. We're all looking for cost savings right now, and I think the reason we're, testifying on this budget is if it comes to emergency pay during states of emergency, or cutting from the personnel budget for baseline salary increases, there are other places to look for cost savings. And I think we really, an agency like DGS, I think, is a good place that we want to partner to look for potential cost savings. We, applaud Secretary Chaudhry's efforts in consolidating some of these contracts. I think because of those efforts, we've been able to really take a deep dive into looking at the contractual spending that we've had over the last 5 years. Some of the things that our analysis at least have found is that, in the last 5 years, we spent $600 million on consulting services for management, $177 million alone in FY25. Maybe that's a place where we can go to look for savings. In security services, those contracts have increased by 32%. We've over budgeted we spent $29 million more on security services, on security contracts. Janitorial contracts is another place where we see increased spending, and we're spending more. I think let me get my numbers here. $22 million more than budgeted on janitorial services. Those are jobs that, if we brought them in-house, we could potentially save money. It's already the policy of the state that in state buildings, state employees should do that work. That's money that we could potentially be saving. That is a better place to look to balance the budget than certainly taking it from baseline salaries and from premium pay when employees are working emergency. So we just ask for help in getting that done, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, and I appreciate suggestions. We're looking at savings anywhere we possibly can, and it's helpful to get suggestions from anywhere we can get them. So I appreciate that and taking the time today. Thanks. Senator Bailey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Real quick, just to clarify, is the premium pay that you're looking for in these areas, is this something that you at one time had and is now being taken away from you, or is this an enhancement that you never got before and now you want?
Correct. We never got the enhancements before. Last year, the same thing happened. We was promised emergency pay. We never got it last year or this year.
So, Senator, if I can, so the way that the language is, and this goes back to a policy that has been in place for DBM since 1999, but to trigger for state employees to trigger the premium state of emergency pay, it requires both a declared state of emergency, which we had, and a state closure. The problem is the state closure generally only occurs during normal business hours, Monday through Friday. So for employees that report, as in this case, the worst of the storm, as you may remember, happened over the weekend. Some I don't know. We certainly feel like it is often a cost-saving measure, but they tend to forget to declare that state closure or whatever. But the state closure rarely happens over the weekend to cover our 24/7 employees that still have to report over the weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Okay. Senator Quarterman, you're good? All right, thank you very much.
Thanks.
This ends our hearing for today.